Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Mr. Robot, Season 4, Episode 7, Proxy Authentication Required. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Mr. Robot, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Mr. Robot up to Season 4, Episode 7. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, this episode... how shall I say? I thought this episode was brilliant. I thought it was absolutely amazing. It was a wonderful piece of art. It was wonderfully acted. It was intense. It was just a really great episode. If you look at it in isolation. But if you don't look at it in isolation and you put it into the context of the larger show, it has a few flaws. It's still a good episode, still a great episode, still doesn't change the fact that it has amazing acting, it was super intense, but it starts to crumble a little bit once you put it in the greater context of the show. Now, I know some people are going to violently disagree with me or be like, what the hell are you talking about, Mark? Because this episode revealed vital information about Elliot and his past and what he's been repressing and the formation of Mr. Robot and why he's there. Explains Elliot's relationship with Mr. Robot more. So you put it in the greater context of the show, it actually makes a lot of sense. It makes it even better. It builds the whole thing because we got to know Elliot over these 4 years. So you put it in the greater context of the show, it becomes even more amazing. That's what you may be thinking. But let me clarify. When I say when you put it in the greater context of the show that it's not so good and it has flaws, I'm not talking about Elliot. I'm talking about Vera. Now, those familiar with my channel know how I feel about Vera. And as much as I love this episode, as much as I thought the actor did a really great job, and as much as I thought that this was a good use for this character, if you look at this episode in isolation, I am not retracting my Vera hate at all. Now, I talked about the Season 1 episode that he appeared in, which I think is one of the worst episodes of any show that I like. Any show I think is good, I think this is up there as one of the worst episodes. Season 1 episode 6, Brave Traveler, I think it's called. That episode disgusted me. I hated it. And the main reason why is because it was a sidebar, and it was just a lame excuse to have this plot, this side plot involving this annoying character who, by the way, the very first scene they introduced Vera, I can't remember what episode, it was early in Season 1, the very first time they showed him, I'm like, oh god, I hate this character, I hope we never see him again. And so when they did a whole episode about him, and they did it in a way that was so contrived, and such really terrible writing in my opinion, and just a really annoying episode that was trying to be all edgy. I thought that was terrible. Now, and the reason why they did this, it was a lazy way to write off a character, in this case Shayla, that they didn't want to have on the show anymore. If they didn't want to have her in the show anymore, I think there would have been much better ways to write her off. And plus, this was a very traumatic event for Elliot, and it's never brought up again until, this episode. So, 4 seasons. I think the very next episode they mentioned in passing, but then Elliot quickly forgot about it. And it's not mentioned again until this episode. And in that case, he doesn't really talk about how traumatic it was for him. He just says in the context that he's afraid it's going to be a repeat with Krista. And I'm right with you, Elliot. I was very afraid it was going to be a repeat with Krista as well. So in that case, the Season 1, Episode 6 was just a lame excuse to write off the character. And it was a sidebar that had absolutely nothing to do with anything and was quickly forgotten about until Vera was reintroduced here. But this episode was a very important episode. It changes the game for Elliot. It will affect him greatly going forward. It's a huge revelation. It explores his character a lot more, and it has purpose in the greater context of the show. So that's why I love this episode and I think it's much, much, much better than the previous episode focused solely on Vera in season 1. But doesn't change the fact that Vera's kind of, his presence in this season overall is kind of contrived. Now I see the reason now why Vera, instead of being a means to write off a character they didn't want to have a show in the show anymore like he was season 1, he's a means to explore, to be the push to explore Elliot's character and his relationship with the Mr. Robot, and reveal this shocking revelation that has an impact on Elliot's life. And that's a much better use of him, to be sure, but doesn't change the fact that the character himself is not really believable, and he's just there as a MacGuffin in both cases. It's just, this is a much better use of that MacGuffin than season 1, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still a MacGuffin and his entire presence is still contrived. I still don't buy that he wants to be king of New York and he wants to own New York. Like, the whole thing, I actually loved when Mr. Robot, like, put him down. It was like, well, you want to be, why don't you go to a real estate agent? You just want to own property, whatever. Because that's what I was thinking. Like, his whole, like, plan is so vague. And it seems ridiculous, and all of a sudden he loves Elliot and thinks he's the best thing ever, and they tried to retcon this, that he always thought this about Elliot, which he clearly did not. He didn't know anything about Elliot's, like, superior hacking abilities or anything like that. And by the way, that episode was such a contrived way to show that Elliot was vulnerable as well, and I think it was the season 1 episode, to be clear, I'm talking about now, and another reason why I think that's horrible. So I don't buy that he'd come back to New York. That whole story with the shaman was a bit stupid, and I don't care about this character. I still think he's a horrible character. I still have no interest in him whatsoever, and I still think the show would be way better without him, and I think that they could have found a much better way to delve in to reveal this backstory. But that being said, this was a very intense episode. I see what they're going for. In fact, this episode was really in contrast to 2 episodes ago, episode 5, which I talked about how that was all no dialogue, and how I actually prefer episodes and shows that are just dialogue, and they granted my gift with this episode because it's mostly dialogue. It's just people in the room talking, which I really, when it's done right, I really enjoy. And I have to admit, definitely done right in this episode. It's definitely super intense. Definitely a well-written dialogue, well-acted dialogue. And also, like, it's obvious what they were going for is, like, this was a play. And they made that clear by having the acts, like the Act 1, Act 2, and even, like, the music was, I think, purposely melodramatic, like, way more than the show. They were purposely going for a feel of, like, a stage play. And, like, a stage play where it all takes place in one room and just people talking, and it's intense. And I love stuff like that. To be clear, when it's done right. So, I mean, you could say it was a bit gimmicky, that it was meant to be a stage play, but I'll say, even though I stand by my statements in episode 5 being gimmicky, but I still say that the season 3 episode 6, where it's all one shot, was not gimmicky, and the distinction I make, and I group this episode in with the season 3 episode was one shot. The reason why these 2 episodes are not gimmicky in episode 5, where they're all not talking, is because the gimmick is outside the perspective of the characters. Like, the characters don't realize that the episode is being shot in one shot. That's just something done for we, the audience. In this episode, the characters don't realize that the entire episode is taking place in one room. I mean, for them, it's natural because they're in the room, and they don't see the Act 1, Act 2. They don't hear the melodramatic music. That's for us, the audience. Whereas, episode 5, a couple episodes ago, there was a police station, no one's talking. That makes no sense. If you're at a police station, people would be talking. And when they're in the cab, they should be talking. In other situations where Dom is like investigating a crime scene, people should be talking. So that was in a universe, that was in the characters, people were not behaving the way they should, therefore it's a gimmick. In this case, in universe, they're fine. They're behaving the way they should. It's just outside of their perspective. We, the audience, we get the whatever device, be it single shot or stage play X, but that's outside of the perspective of the characters, therefore I'm fine with it, and I don't think it's gimmicky. When it becomes gimmicky is when it's unnatural for the characters in the universe, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I know I'm going to get dislikes on the video because I'm bad-mouthing the brilliant episode 5 that everyone loves, but I don't care. But anyway, so, back to this episode. There was some controversy, or not controversy, that's not the word. There were some parts that were contrived. Controversy is like controversy. No, but there was some contrived moments in this episode in particular, particularly when Vera was pushing Krista to give Elliot a therapy section. I mean, it's obvious that like the writers just wanted Elliot to be pushed in this situation to reveal this huge revelation. I don't think it makes sense in character for Vera to want Krista to have a therapy. I mean, the excuse that they give in this episode is that Vera is trying to break Elliot so he can rebuild him, and they even said that in the previous episode. But I still don't buy that. I don't buy his motivations. I think his goals of being king of New York or owning New York, whatever the fuck they said, is still too vague and doesn't make sense. And his obsession with Elliot is still too vague, doesn't make sense. It's obvious this is all contrived writing so they could get to the point where Elliot would make this huge revelation. Honestly, I do think they could have come to this a much better way. But, again, if I watch this episode in complete isolation from the rest of the show, and all I see is this intense story about this gangster holding someone at gunpoint, and the guy is trying to help the woman who's being held at gunpoint, and he's forcing them to have this huge revelation. And I don't know the background with Vera, and I don't know that Mr. Elliot has, or not Mr. Elliot, what is Mr. Robot and Elliot? Why Elliot has so much other things going on with the Dark Army and 5/9 hacks and all this other stuff that this is actually a bit of a distraction. Vera wanting to own New York is a bit ridiculous. So if I wasn't aware of any of that, I would actually enjoy this a lot more. Because I wouldn't know how contrived Vera is as a character, and how he shouldn't really even be there, and how he is a distraction. I mean, what he gets to reveal in this episode about Elliot's backstory is not a distraction. Obviously, it's very important to the story, very important to Elliot's character, but how it's revealed, namely Vera, is a distraction. And but again, if I take that knowledge out and watch this as a stage play, it's really intense. You got this gangster holding them at gunpoint. You got a battle of wits. You have, like this really intense dialogue. So, yeah. So, I love this episode until I remember that I hate Vera, basically. So, and that ending, that ending was so intense. I still didn't know. I might have to watch it again. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments. How Krista got that knife, how she cut herself free. I kind of missed that. Maybe they foreshadowed it. Did Elliot plan her the knife somehow, make it so she could get it, or was he completely? In that case, he's kind of distracting Vera because he knew that Krista could come and kill him. Or that it had nothing to do with Elliot and it was just Krista did it on her own accord. I kind of leaning towards that second one, but I don't know. Someone tell me if you caught that, or maybe I'll watch it again and find out. I don't know. But either way, that was a very intense ending where Elliot's kind of a broken man, and Krista just comes out of nowhere and stabs Vera in the back. It was very theater-esque. And I love theater, so I did like this episode a lot. Anyway, my rating for Proxy Authentication Required. Such a weird... They're just going by the error codes. They don't even give a shit anymore if it matches up with the actual theme of the episode, but whatever. Anyway, my rating for this episode out of 10 is an 8. Extremely good, because it was extremely well acted. It was extremely intense. I love the revelation we have and what this means for Elliot's character and how it changes the game, how powerful this episode was, and how powerful the dialogue was, how great the acting was, how great this was revealed, makes it a really great episode. The fact that it's focused on Vera, a nonsense character who shouldn't be in the show, definitely should never come back for season 4, does hurt this episode. It prevents me from giving it a 10 because I don't like Vera. I think he's a contrived character. I think he never should have came back in season 4, and I stand by that despite the fact that I love this episode. But not as much, obviously. It's held back by Vera. Anyway, that is it for my review of Mr. Robot Season 4, Episode 7. Now, I will be back next week to cover episode 8. However, other thing I want to say is this Wednesday I will be doing a live discussion about the entire first half, our mid-season discussion of Mr. Robot with my brother Apkin Tomko over on his channel, and we will be joined by another special guest, Darren from D's Reviews. So the three of us will have this discussion about Mr. Robot, and the other two, Darren and Apkin, are a lot more positive on the show. So if you think, oh, I'm too negative, and you just like to come on my videos and dislike them because you think I'm too negative on the show, well, check out our video because they're a lot more positive than I am. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be talking about all 7 episodes that have aired thus far in season 4, and that will be Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. West Coast time, so be sure to check that out. If I get the link, I'll put it in the description below. But as for me, as I said, I'll be back covering Mr. Robot every week, and if you enjoy my channel, please be sure to subscribe, because I do many more videos and other shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.